Welcome to Listening with China Blue. This is a podcast that focuses on how listening not only informs us about what is occurring in the world around us, but also helps us connect with others, build stronger businesses, strengthens our mental health, and become more creative and compassionate individuals. As more and more people practice attentive listening in a community, it becomes a community building practice that strengthens our mental health as we learn from our neighbors. I will be interviewing people from all walks of life to learn how listening has informed them in their field and helped them to make intelligent decisions. They will be artists, musicians, composers, dancers, business people, psychologists, neuroscientists, and Buddhists, to name a few. About me, I'm an internationally exhibiting sound-based artist. In my work, Discovering Unheard Sounds, I realized that the core component that drove my work was simply listening. That realization put me on the path of speaking about and helping people learn to become better listeners. I began with leading sound walks, which I continue to do in the upstate New York region to help people learn to listen from nature. And now, tune your ears to this podcast to learn about the power of listening. And do pay attention until the end for further information on how to start your own listening practice, share it with others, and to support Listening with China Blue. So today we're speaking with Lisa Kelley. Lisa is a vocalist, performance artist, and mother residing in Kingston, New York. Steeped in traditional theater, vocal, and performance studies in her youth, Lisa's creative process continues to revolve around investigations of identity, musical genres and styles, dream action theater, her family's immigration memories from the Philippines, universal archetypes, Eastern philosophy, and a recognition of the metaphysical and spiritual. Lisa's performances and writing explore womanhood, grief and loss, dreams and the confluence of the self and nature, and the cosmos. She spent 12 years working closely with Pauline Oliveros and Ione as a staff member and artist of the Deep Listening Institute, performing in numerous festivals and concerts, and collaborating with fellow deep listening artists across the globe. Lisa is a deep listening certificate holder and an ordained high priestess and board member of the Ministry of Maåt. Lisa is currently the founding executive director in the Kingston Midtown Arts District and an arts commissioner for the City of Kingston. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, I'm happy to be here, China.
I am so happy to have you after all these years of knowing you. I'm so excited to be able to invite you to talk to you about your work.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm so honored.
Well, you have a unique approach because you're a creative person that's, as you say, steeped in theater, but you also have been highly influenced by Pauline Oliveros and the Deep Listening Institute. And, as an artist, I was thinking that experience must have had some, I was going to say deep, I was trying to avoid using the word deep because it's going to be used forever now.
Yeah, when it starts to not mean anything anymore. But it does actually. It really does. Yeah.
Profound.
Profound. Yeah.
Yeah,
Many
influence.
layers.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk to you about how it influenced your work.
Well, firstly, I didn't know really anything about Pauline when I first came to the deep listening space in about 2003. I was mostly concerned as a vocalist to expanding my field of understanding and of how to express vocally, lots of different ways. It was actually Ione, your first guest on this podcast, um, that really brought me into the space, and then the community brought me secondly to the space. was always in the background of deep listening space, but I really didn't know who she was. And so when I facilitate a deep listening workshop, I really say that deep listening came at me from the side, not at my face, like directly in my ear. It was a very kind of unconscious choice
Wow.
that came through. I learned just by being present with Pauline and Ione and in the work and mission of the Deep Listening Institute, and then realized just how prolific is and has been for 50 years. And I was like, oh, mind blown. Okay, that was about like 5 years into my job, and she still continues to unfold. Her legacy continues to unfold today. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's so fascinating. And I know that last year you participated in the 24-hour drone experiments in sound and music at the Basilica Hudson.
Yes. Yes, that was a wonderful invitation.
I wanted to, for those that don't know the heart chant, you facilitated the heart chant, which is an offering of sonic healing for all beings through vocalization and listening. And this was written by Pauline in response to the terrorist attacks on September 11th.
Yes.
So the heart chant's instructions invite people to basically create a community through sound. Tell us how you did that at the drone festival.
Oh, wow. Well, the beauty of the text score is that you could do it with any number of people. I mean, I've done it with a group of 5 or 6 people, up to, you know, 150 to 200 people. I think maybe for the drone fest, it was probably closer to that number, over 200 people. And it was definitely not just me. There was a bunch of plants. I had a bunch of helpers to listening plants to gather to basically shepherd everyone into a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah Van Buren, who was one of the organizers of the event, is also a deep listening certificate holder, um, was able to, kind of prime the program, and to get everyone who had been sleeping overnight. So this was the closing um, activity of the whole event, and she had placed the score around the basilica, and so people could read it at their leisure and throughout the day and evening. And so that seemed to really work because it it's very gentle. It was a very gentle introduction. And so
Mm-hmm.
and then everyone had been in the drone fest, like, for 24 hours. So they were like highly receptive, they were all sleepy and highly receptive. You just had to rouse them off of their pallets and sleeping bags and cushions and things. And really the mastery really of Pauline's scores is the utter simplicity of the instructions. Um, they it really is effortless, really. As long as you give the introduction about, um, well, I don't even think you need an introduction to what deep listening is, and how to approach it, especially at an event like that, because it's just, they're so open. When you've been in a constant drone for 24 hours,
Oh.
your ears are just primed and tuned up, and consciously and subconsciously and unconsciously and collectively. So it's a really cool event that way. And so the heart chant was just such a beautiful offering for uh, for people who had been opened up, um willingly opened up sonically. So it was pretty easy to do, pretty easy to accomplish, and it was really beautiful.
I have heard stories from people who have actually participated, and they've told me that it was so amazingly powerful to be a
Yeah.
part of that the experience. It's just not the vocalization part, but how participating with all these other people in a room vocalizing simultaneously was so powerful.
Yes. Yes. And the consent of touching your neighbor,
Oh,
um, where you put your hand on the back of the heart space of the person, um, to your left, and you put your hand on your own heart center on the front. So there's a loop that happens, a feedback loop, physical. That's very physical, as you're sounding, and that is it's very powerful because yeah, you're actually touching the heart centers of every person within that loop.
oh my.
It's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. I can't get enough of it. It's just like really, really down to the root of how we're connected.
I think that we should have a place where it's done on a regular basis.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, we need a heart chant center for healing.
Yeah, yeah. Just so everybody can feel the hearts and the love of the people around them.
Yeah, we did that for the tribute concert in Kingston for Pauline, not long after she passed, at City Hall, and in the council chambers, which is like the upper floor of City Hall, and it's a fairly historic building built in the 19th century, and with really high ceilings and a beautiful view of the mountains, and we all managed to squeeze ourselves around to form a circle, and it was a incredible. Rainbows came through the windows
Oh no.
during the heart chant. Yeah, I know, it was wild. It was like a signal, like, from Pauline, and we were on the right track here. Yeah, yeah, really beautiful. The heart chant seems to always leave a signature behind in my memory every time I've ever done it. Um, yeah.
And how many times have you done it?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really kept count. Um, but Ione was facilitating a lot too, in the last couple of years. Um, and Pauline would do it a fair amount. I don't know. In the last 15 years, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can remember the feeling of each one.
Putting it that way over a span of 15 years gives it some perspective.
Yeah, yeah. It ends up being kind of multidimensional in terms of the experience. Like each time it's a layer added.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, stepping away from mm, Pauline and Ione's direct influence on you, um, tell me about your some of the creative work that you're doing now.
Hmm. Um, well, I took a bit of I mean, from an outward creative standpoint, a bit of a hiatus while raising my son.
Ah,
Um, but I also, tangential to working with Pauline and Ione, I was also learning a lot about Linda Mary Montano's work, with the Art Life Institute, and her her philosophy is that art is life and life is art. Her long stamina endurance pieces are really a testament to everyday life being an art practice, if you choose it to be. And and so I really took that as a license that I could, take a break from performative in the traditional sense on a stage and from an audience, to how it could apply to my everyday life, how creativity can apply to the simplest acts in, with no witnesses,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
spectators. um, and so I've been meditating on that since my son was a toddler. And now that he's 10, I'm in the last couple of years, I've been moving into get my chops back in theater and working in, as you know, with the Earth Opera, with Elizabeth Clark's Earth Opera, um, at Widow Jane Mine in Rosendale, which is one of my favorite spots. And being an executive director for an arts organization that primarily focuses on visual arts as 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 the source, the material of creativity, has been also how I can apply my creativity to that position.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's shifted forms from performance art and recording albums and collaborating in that way to this this leadership work and this community building work, which also needs creativity in it, and
Oh, sure.
yeah, and a lot of listening. Yeah.
And how does listening get folded into that creative work?
Oh, it has everything to do with the creative work, um, the visioning and the collective visioning of, of a mission driven um, organization, and how each voice matters, from our youth workforce training teenagers um, to legacy holding of one of our most important community art leaders, Benjamin Wigfall here in Kingston, as a visionary printmaker, and really listening to those legacies. Pauline being at the deep listening space, um, holding those legacies. They reverberate in my ears. I think that I love the concept that Pauline has brought forward about that your ears are always open. They're always receiving information. And if you're cognizant enough to be receptive to what that information could be, in all its different forms, um, it it definitely informs me. It informs how I approach everything I learn, everything that I hear from others, all of the things that I read, all the conflicts that come from doing community work, the intergenerational conflicts that can arise. There's just so much differences in language um, between generations.
Mm,
Could be saying the same words, but they're completely different,
sure.
the way that you say them. And so, yeah, I'm really being very sensitive to that in my work in particular. Yeah.
Nice.
It's a
Also,
practice, right, China?
yeah, it is a practice.
I'm
That's
not going to be perfect. And it's a process and a practice.
that's how I always frame it, as a practice, because it's something that you're doing you should be doing all the time.
Yeah. And you could get revelations, they come and go. I tend to forget a lot, and I'm always trying to remember, or not trying, but I am remembering to remember.
Hmm.
And I forget again, and
Sure.
and then I have this grand revelation, and then go on to the next thing, and then it's a process, it's a journey, it's a beautiful way to approach life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I also wanted to ask you a question about your family's immigration memories from the Philippines. I noticed that in your bio.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because,
Yeah, actually that is something in the background of my life. Um, Gathering the stories. I think they say every other or every 2 or 3 generations there's a record keeper in each
mm,
family. Um, and um, and I've been driven to since I was a kid
oh,
to
wow.
gather information um about my family's story. So my mother's side of the family immigrated to the United States from the Philippines in the post World War II, 1940, 1952, I believe, or
Mm,
so. And my mother was about seven, um, 6 or 7, and my grandfather was in the U.S. Army, um, so he was able to bring the whole family um, to become naturalized in the United States. Um, and so they were um, they were based in Savannah, Georgia. A lot of
oh,
A lot of Filipinos ended up being stationed in San Francisco in the Bay Area
yeah,
or other parts of California. For some reason, and I don't really know exactly why yet, he was stationed in Savannah, Georgia. And so, being a brown person in Savannah, Georgia in the 50s, they were the brownest people in their school,
sure.
um, along with a couple of black students. And so they basically whitewashed their identity
Mhm.
pretty fast as a means of survival. And I learned why I had was having trouble connecting to other Filipinos when I got older, because the only heritage that were of our culture that was maintained was the food, really,
Yeah.
and our Catholic upbringings. Um, but that's not even. I mean, that was Spanish colonialism. So anyway, it's very layered. Anyway, so I've been trying to get the stories together, along with I've been getting my DNA, and of course the Filipino side of like those DNA tests are pretty loose, and not that the recordings are not very clear. So I've been getting oral histories from my aunts and uncles um to piece together the story the story of my mother's immigration. Um my father, on the other hand, is 10 or 12 generations um northeastern New Englanders. Um
Mm,
And so there's a bit of a migration on my grandmother's side, um, where she doesn't know a lot of her heritage, and that's a bit of a mystery too on my father's side. She was born in Kansas and then moved in California. So anyway, we're a bit of a migratory family, as most are. Um, so
yeah, it's a very American story in some ways.
yeah, yeah. But when during COVID, there was a lot of reckoning around um, Black and Brown identities in America. And I read this really fascinating book. I can't remember the author. It's called Brown Skin, White Mind.
Oh,
And and it was really about the Asian experience of my generation, and having been whitewashed, our
yeah.
identities being whitewashed. And what does it really bear? Because I think mostly I'm perceived white, but then there's always that question of um what do you got in there, Lisa? What's in there? You got something going on, like, that question.
Well, in looking at you, you look very Caucasian.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons why I brought it up, because I thought, gee, this is a shock for me to see this as a part of your family history. And for me, it's particularly interesting because I'm also a hapa, as the
Mhm.
Hawaiians say, which means half Asian and half Caucasian.
Yes.
And I'm half Chinese, but nobody would guess it because I look more, well, I don't look Chinese. So if you don't look Chinese, then obviously you must be Caucasian. That's the assumption.
Yeah. 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 A lot of people would always ask me if I was Native American. I
Oh,
had Native American in me, in my blood. And I
yeah,
don't know if I actually do. I'm not even sure about that. But it's like that otherness, there's always this
right.
a little bit of otherness that stood me apart, um, and stood my brother apart from growing up in a small town in North Carolina, um, where everybody's kind of a cousin with each other, which is not an exaggeration. I know that's kind of a a trope, but everyone is like fourth and fifth cousins. Um,
Yeah.
so I think I always sort of it was a part of my identity, not of being another, even though and I don't really look it.
Well,
Yeah.
I know, and I often think about that familiar environment where in my family I was raised with lots of sounds of different languages.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know if did you have that experience? Did you hear Filipino?
Tagalog.
Excuse me, excuse me,
Yes.
that was wrong.
Okay.
Tagalog speaking in your family as well as English?
Yes, my grandparents spoke Tagalog, and my aunts, my mother and my aunts and uncles, um, they understood it, but they didn't speak it.
Hmm.
And I always found that fascinating that they could understand it, but not really speak it. And that I realize now that they were encouraged not to speak it,
Yeah,
that they were encouraged to speak English, as to assimilate to their environment. Um,
but also your the pressure of your environment is the dominant language is English, so you learn it's easier as time goes by to speak English because not only in the home but also in your community everybody is speaking English.
yes, but my grandparents still to as long as they lived had very thick Tagalog accents.
Uh-huh.
And I loved listening to them. I loved listening to their stories. Actually, one of my greatest losses is oral history that I had taken of my grandmother, because the way, just her voice is a beautiful memory, ear memory. Maybe one day it'll resurface, but um, yeah, it's an
Well,
important part of who I am.
yeah, and I think about that in terms of fast forward to today, and we're talking about deep listening and how that must have sort of primed you for your interest in listening and vocalization.
I suppose so. Um, I think what also primed me is that, well, my mother was a very a very beautiful singer. She had a beautiful voice. Um, and my father has absolutely no musicality whatsoever. So I really love that dynamic that I lived in, is that she would have this gorgeous voice and I knew exactly where it was attributed to, my ability to sing. And my father, he gave me a whole other set of somethings, like I think my sense of humor and just the way he is, the way he is, his being. But he has like no rhythm, no musicality, like nothing. Um, it's fascinating because I haven't met too many people like that. Like, to some extent, most people have musicality of some kind. but I love it. I love it when he calls me on my birthday and sings happy birthday to me. It's the most unique version of happy birthday that you'll ever hear. I love that. I love it. I embrace that. I embrace the fact that my mother had this beautiful, like pristine voice, and he just had the moxie too. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, I have to think on that a little more. I hadn't really thought about language and um the cultural divide of language and how that could inform my listening practice. Have you found that to be in your own listening?
Well, I was raised with my father and his family speaking Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
my mother and her family speaking Schweizerdeutsch, which is Swiss German. And then together as we grew up, we we gravitated slowly to speaking, of course, English all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So as time went on, my parents ended up just settling on English. But when we went to the various families, the Chinese family, everybody hung out and spoke Chinese, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but as time went by, my father lost his hold on his Chinese language because he was
Yeah.
being westernized. I mean, he had to, it was
Yeah.
English was everywhere and it was his not his native language, so he had to adjust and learn how to speak it and speak it properly. And my mother was, my mother was educated in English as well as in Schweizerdeutsch because she was raised in Switzerland, but
Mm-hmm.
she came to the United States relatively young, so she transitioned over to English quite easily
Uh-huh.
because it was already part of her education. But again, going to her family's gatherings, it they were considerably more westernized because they actually, I don't know why, to tell you the truth, now that I think about it. Maybe they adapted a little bit easier for some reason
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because my mother's family came rather late in their lives too. So, but maybe it was because English was a little bit more present in Switzerland at the time
Uh-huh.
than it it was in my father's community. My father's community was a very rural Chinese community in northern Vancouver.
Wow. What an interesting, that's an interesting meet cute. I'm sure your parents.
Well, the most bizarre part is the way they met was they lived across the street from each other.
Oh, when they were
They
adults
were uh
in
late teens.
late teens. Oh, they grew up together.
So, oh yeah, yeah. Basically, yeah. And they literally lived across the street from each other. The Chinese on one side and the Swiss on the other.
Oh, that sounds like a cool neighborhood.
Well, I think it could have only happened in Berkeley, California. You know, it,
Yeah.
Berkeley is a university town and people from everywhere in the world show up there and live there. So it's possible to have people from different cultures down the street around the corner, up the
Right.
bend.
So where did Vancouver come in?
That's where my father was born and raised.
Oh, okay. And then they moved to Berkeley.
He and his brother and his sisters moved to Berkeley.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so they just developed a thing for each other. And then both families said when they realized what was going on, they backed off and they said, no, 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 you cannot do that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it was illegal at the time,
Oh,
An
tell me more.
interracial relationship, much less marriage, was illegal.
When was this? When was it? Was this
Late 40s.
late 40s? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My parents met in the 71, 70s. So
Mm-hmm.
things
Hmm.
had changed
Oh, yeah.
quite a bit since from then.
Yeah.
Um, but it was unusual. I think it completely threw them both for a loop. My dad is like one of the most notorious Scorpios, like deep Scorpios. He's got a deep well of information that I haven't been able to tease out of him yet um about how they met really. And he's like a stone I've been trying to crack for years. um you know how some of those still waters run deep,
Oh, yeah.
he's
Oh, yeah.
definitely one of those. um but but yeah, he that's interesting. It's so interesting how love happens across cultures, how they could come spontaneously like that. I think my parents were similar. He was stationed in Savannah after Vietnam. He was in Vietnam for about a year, and having been stationed there, and they met on a blind date.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, I think he threw her off her plan. And my mother, yeah, yeah, I think my mother had a much more sensible plan than to marry my dad.
yeah. It's amazing how life can throw a loop.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Hmm.
those all you have all these recordings, and you're gathering the stories of your family's immigration.
Mm.
Is that something that you see as a piece altogether in the
Hmm.
future?
Yeah, I think so. Most of the performance artwork I've done, uh, I've I've refused to say they're finished. I've always just called them experiments. And so, yeah, what's next? It's always up. It's always everything's on the table. Um, in my earlier performance artwork, I was doing translations of my dreams. I was doing adaptations of my dreams into
Mm-hmm.
performance. Some of the earlier deep listening space work that I didn't really ever consider, but Pauline and Ione were probably my greatest advocates to to getting it on, just putting it on, put it on, just do it. The philosophy of it's not about product, it's about process. Um, and even in a work that's not fully formed, it can it deserves to be performed and or worked out. Like so,
Oh.
a lot of my work has been workshops of things like
Mm-hmm.
sketches and um yeah, like I say, experiments. um and a lot of it is very internal, an internal life brought forth in different ways. um and Yeah, I have to say, I mean, to be quite honest with you, and no, and it might be a little silly. I definitely, my life has never been a straight line. Um, it's been very curvy and roundabout in a lot of ways, and I've had to learn to trust that process for a long time. And I don't really know if it's because, well, there's probably a reason for that, but I it's like in Native American warriors that um ride the saddle backwards into battle. Um there's a certain level of trust
I don't know that story, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a history of certain warriors being the ones that ride backwards. Um, I don't know the whole story either. I wish I could tell you, it's so that it could be, but there's a deck of cards. It's an oracle deck that is called the Power Deck, and there's one card called Trust, and it tells the story um, of the Native American warriors that ride backwards
wow.
into battle, and maybe it's a distraction, maybe it's a technique of to distract the enemy, to throw them off, a little bit, but I don't have any enemies, so it's just really me and my maybe myself, um, kind of not knowing my own path, but I'm okay with that. I'm not an academic in a lot of ways. I don't approach my work that way. I don't really approach um, the things that my desire to learn is uh, is a little more intuitive and resonance, all about the resonance of what I'm feeling or what I'm yearning to learn. Uh, so that's where the dream work of like working with Ione and
Mhm.
in our show, the Dream Life Radio has been a really beautiful unfolding because you just don't know what I don't have any expectation about it. But just the subject matter in and of itself is like so rich, there's so much to mine there, just from an individual, from my own dreams, from my
Tell
own.
us a little bit more about the Dream Life Radio.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a weekly radio show, and it's on Radio Kingston, and Thursdays from 6 to 7, and it's all about fostering, a dream community. A dream community um, is one that um, talking about your dreams is an everyday common task, you know, um, talking about your dreams, um, not interpreting. It's not about interpretation. It's not about um, trying to tell you what it is that you're dreaming or uh, anything like that. It's really about experiencing others' dreams like it's like they're your own. So if the quantum dreaming aspect, which I love, Ione talks really eloquent about, where you tell me your dream, I'm listening to your dream, I'm having a version of your dream while I'm listening to your dream, then then you're having a version of my version of your dream when I tell you what my version is. And it just keeps going. And then you have a new version and it just keeps going um like the multiple face goddess, that just
Mhm.
always turning and always turning. And if you build a dream community on that concept, um, then it just goes on forever. It goes on forever through lifetimes. It goes on through life and death, and um, I mean that's where I go in the idea is that it's just I don't know, maybe our greatest purpose. Who knows?
Wow.
Yeah, it's way
I
bigger than
did
me.
I didn't expect us to be going there. So
Yeah.
you're listening to dreams and you're listening to other people's dreams. And
Mhm.
that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, imagine
A dream.
what uh, imagine what what our world could be if we just shared our dreams with each other, like, and had versions of each other's dreams and constant retelling of our and it becomes one big dream. um I don't know, I think a lot of problems could be solved. Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, again, it's like a I don't think a lot of problems can be solved by just slicing it with a sword, like
Sure.
just let it like get it done. But then I think that the more existential issues, the crises, the problems that we have, um, you can't really go at it straight ahead. Um, I think that, or I don't know how effective it is. You can, I don't know how it would take, centuries and centuries and centuries. Like, look at us now. We haven't really changed as a humanity, it's centuries and centuries, thousands of years later, um, we're still like relearning the same lesson over and over and over and over again. So if you take a more indigenous approach, because in the indigenous communities, they really embrace, some of them, like the Aboriginals, um, embrace dreaming into their everyday life. They talk about it in community. They talk in with the family. They actually listen to the dreaming of the elders and of the young ones, the multi generations, and they learn, and troubleshoot, and they problem solve with these dreams in mind, um, because they are all one. It's known that all the dreams are connected, no matter who is dreaming, um, and that it matters. It really matters.
That's so amazing to think about because in Western society, dreaming is repressed, and conversations about dreams are often about how people are freaked out by their dreaming the night before. But
Yeah.
other than that, we don't savor our dreams, we don't share our dreams, and so it's an interesting thing to think about as dreaming as being a part of living, just like walking
Yeah.
or talking, and
Yeah.
that they tell us stories
Hmm.
about our world and how we are living in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just last night when we had the show, I was retelling a dream, and I prefaced it by saying that I wish that I had written it down because I lost some details. And Ione was just like, "No dream worries, no dream worries. Just what tell us what you do remember." Um and I had to laugh because I'm like, again, I'm always forgetting and remembering and remembering and forgetting, forgetting to remember and remembering to remember all the time. Um and that Well, yeah, that's okay. It's okay. But the telling is the important part, like the imparting of it, is really important. Yeah. Um, at least to me, I tell you, it's like, I think we're 29 shows in, and I'm like fascinated at how the conversation has changed, is shaping me. Talking about my dreams every week. I had no idea. I had no idea. And to bring others on too and talk about their dreams.
So when you listen to other people's dreams, that influences or impacts your world in a way.
Well, yeah, especially if we're doing dream action theater. Did we do dream action with theater with you? I can't remember.
No, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
we've been doing, next time you come back on, but we've been doing it more and more. And I was a little nervous when we were talking about the idea of doing spontaneous dream action performances on the radio, because it can get wacky. And
Tell us a little bit of what Dream Action Theater is.
um, well, dream action theater is basically spontaneous improvisations, that come through from listening to a dream. And so being a vocalist, I do a lot of vocalizing. It's not interpretation, it's actual, like, oh, you're telling me in your dream you're walking down the street and I'm acting it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I'm walking down the street and I feel sad. And, my dream action could be something like, just sort of I don't know, a feeling or emotion that comes from my version of the dream. So it's a spontaneous version of the dream from each player. So Ione and I and Jaguar Mary have been doing these spontaneous versions of the dream as it's being told. And then when we did the Dream Tent last weekend, so, we're in the 29th Dream Festival, folks. And we had the Dream Tent in Kingston last week, and we had a bunch of performances, and we did a lot of dream action theater, and it got a lot of new dream action players, which were also Earth Opera folk, that are, they're very much in the same sphere of being open and receptive to improvisation. So that's it in a nutshell, basically, dream action theater. It's very satisfying.
So you're starting to enact this also on the radio,
Which one?
on your radio program.
Yeah. Yeah. Next time if you bring us a dream, we'll perform it.
My dreams hide from me.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Do
Yes.
you know they're happening, but
I usually don't know they're happening.
mm-hmm.
I usually wake up with a things to do list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of that as a dream.
Oh, well, maybe you should consider it.
It seems really tawdry and boring. Number 1, don't forget this. Number 2, don't forget that. Oh, then there's the 3 and 4 and 27.
I've done performance pieces that are kind of like that in the past. The first year I ever did my own taxes, I did a
Oof.
I did a performance piece called A Fine Romance, like a finance romance, a fine romance. And I had all this paper from the tax prep that I created a backing track of my own mumblings and fumblings with paper, and did this whole performance around like a movement piece with paper and that concept of navigating, yeah, something that's like so like dry and but ends up being like one of my favorite pieces when I think back, just because I wanted to throw the paper up in the air when I was in the process, and so when I did the performance I was able to throw the paper in the air and to do whatever I wanted with that paper, and
Nice.
throw it to the wind. And so in a way there's uh the pieces have been ritualistic in a way of processing um the an experience. So I think basically that deep listening as a practice, because it has different modalities, it's not just about listening, but it's about the dreaming, and it's about the movement, the way your body moves through, responds to listening. That I found myself circling those three as a, pathway of experience, all along. I was more like into the movement part, the dreaming years ago, maybe like 10 years ago. I wasn't really into the dreaming. But the when I was vocalizing more and I was performing more, it's more about movement. It was more about listening. So, you know, when it comes to the practice, when Pauline used to say that it's for the ear-minded people, it's for ear-minded people. um, but that's kind of a misleading too, because when you are a listening body, when you have a listening body, your body is listening to vibration, your whole body. Um, and that's part of the practice too of listening, is using your whole body to listen. Then it's not just about the ear at all. But maybe that's just the entry point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of pontificating on that, but
Well, it's the beginning because that's where it arrives.
all right. Yeah.
And then gets it it impacts the body through vibration.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you can't hear without vibration, so one influences the other.
Yeah. But you can hear your your skin can feel vibration.
Yeah.
So that's always one of my favorite um practices with walking meditations is walk, listen like you have ears on the soles of your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Through your whole body.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk a little bit in our last few minutes, a little bit more about your vocalist works. And I really loved how you actually inserted a few sounds in our chat. And I know that you had mentioned earlier, of course, that you're not working on anything in particular right now, but you're sort of stepping into this opera that you had mentioned before.
Mm.
And I wanted to hear a little bit about your directions and vocalization at this point.
Mm. My directions in vocalization. Hmm.
It seems so natural for you, when you were talking about dreaming and you mentioned the sounds.
Mm-hmm.
You vocalized your dreaming experience, and that came out so naturally and so beautifully.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I think that I've become been very comfortable with exploring the field these days, vocally. Um, I think of like I imagine when I say explore the field that if I were standing out on a vista, um, or in a room with a lot of different features, that there's a lot of opportunities um, to vocalize in a bunch of different ways. And it could be a response to the external environment, but it could also be what's going on in my inner world. Um, I can't really say, but I'm very open to exploring in a lot of different ways that concept. So doing traditional theater again, which I haven't done in an age, I think it's probably been 15 years or so, has been really turning me on because I really I love the container of traditional theater. There's something really satisfying about knowing um, the formula of it,
Mhm.
formula of a beginning, middle, and end, and the expectations of the technical end of things. I'm really open to seeing where that might lead in the next few years. Um, because I have been very much out vocally experimenting and you know fishing vocally, fishing a bit vocally. Vocal fisherwoman. Um, but I'd like to bring it back. I think it might give me some perspective on a form that I could settle with for a while. But I am so spontaneous in that way, in my vocal ways, and I'm very comfortable there. I think I get a lot of people are like, do you have any recordings? I don't have a ton of like solo recordings. I have a lot of field recordings and things, but I guess that's where, again, I guess that's my upbringing with Pauline and Ione, about that it be about process and not product. So I'm moving through that, and I'll finally come to some product.
That sounds like a perfect moment to say thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
This was really
Yeah.
so nice. Nice to listen in to your thoughts about listening. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Listening with China Blue. I hope it inspires you to build your own listening practice. This begins as a daily practice of attentively listening without judgment. And you can ask yourself, what is your own version of silence? The music for this podcast is from China Blue's Saturn Walk, co-composed with Lance Massey, the creator of the T-Mobile ringtone. If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to chinablueart.com. And also, please follow me on Facebook at china.blue.art, at Instagram at china_blue_art, and on X at China Blue Art.